So do we know why so many measles cases, might be present here among Mennonites?
I'm sure many people are wondering that question, asking that question of themselves these days. And the first thing to note is that Mennonites are not the only group among whom there are outbreaks of measles. And the second thing is to understand who these Mennonites are and how they fit into the larger Mennonite community. There are over 25 different kinds of Mennonites in Canada today, and they belong to what are called conferences, or what others would call denominations. And they range from Old Order Mennonites who drive horses and buggies in Ontario to Mennonites who look and act like nobody different. Everyone in Canada, they're just the same as everyone else. And then, of course, you have the Amish and the Hutterites, who are also part of the larger Anabaptist Mennonite family. These particular Mennonites, they're called Old Colony Mennonites, and they have a unique history in Saskatchewan and here in Manitoba.
Can you take us into a bit of that unique history, John?
Sure. Their ancestors came to Canada from Russia in the 1870s. As farmers, they were highly desired by the Canadian government, who wanted them to come to Canada and to the West and to settle here and help open up the country. And to attract them to Canada, they made some promises. First of all, they promised that they wouldn't have to go to war, which is a fundamental Mennonite peace principle. And they promised them freedom of religion to worship as they wanted. And they promised them the freedom to run their own schools in their own Low German language. But that began to change in the 1890s with the passage of the Manitoba Schools Act. And that act ruled that English should be the only language of instruction. And for these Mennonites, that was a breaking of a promise. And during World War I, then the government clamped down on that, and went further to try to get rid of anything that was German. And of course, since they spoke German, that was another problem. And that was altogether too much for these Mennonites. And in the early 1920s to 1930s, about 6,000 of them moved from Manitoba and Saskatchewan en masse to Mexico, where they were promised those freedoms. And these Old Colony Mennonites, the ones we're talking about today with the measles, are their descendants. Many of them have access to Canadian citizenship still through their parents and grandparents, great-grandparents, and many of them have come back to Canada to live, mostly in Manitoba and Ontario.
How does the history, what we're talking about, you're talking about, relate to what we're seeing today with measles?
Well, the connection is suspicion of government, something Mennonites already had in spades, considering that their ancestors, the early Anabaptists, were persecuted and executed by governments in Europe in the 16th century, and then again by the Soviet Union in the 20th century. And how this involves measles is that over time, they continued to have that deep suspicion of government, and they had a strong desire to be left alone to make their own decisions. Unfortunately, that's left some of them open to conspiracy theories about vaccinations, including the idea, which has been refuted, that there's a link between autism and vaccination. And this is particularly true in Texas, which you mentioned, which has the largest measles outbreak in the United States. And that's also where a large group of Old Colony Mennonites live in Seminole, in the western part of the states. They moved there from Mexico in the 1970s. And on both sides of the border, of course, the pandemic didn't help anything. Many Old Colony Mennonites saw government requests or mandates to close down worship services as infringing on their religious freedom. And as a result, some of them are open to conspiracy theories when they see the government telling them what to do about measles and vaccinations.
This is a difficult question, of course, but what can be done then to help increase the acceptance of vaccinations in these communities? Because what you're talking about is trust, and trust that was broken. So
right. And for an answer to that question, I talked to the former and current editors of the Mennonitische Post, or the Mennonite Post, a German-language newspaper supported by Mennonite Central Committee, which is based in Steinbach. And the Post is sharing vaccination information with its 10,000 subscribers in Manitoba, Ontario, the United States, Mexico, Central and South America. And it is encouraging them to consider and think about vaccinations. And the one thing they all emphasize, both of those editors emphasized, is not to try to tell these people what to do, but rather to listen to their concerns and their fears about vaccinations. What can work, they said, is that information about measles is best coming from inside the community, not from outside it. And so the Post, for example, has published articles about the importance of taking measles seriously and getting vaccinated. It also recommends that people not travel or go visiting other homes if they have measles in their own house, because, of course, measles is so transmissible. The newspaper has also emphasized that getting vaccinated is a Christian responsibility. At the core of Christian faith, they said, is the command of Jesus to love and care for others. And one way they're telling their subscribers they can do this, A, is by not getting measles in the first place, but B, if you have it, don't visit and don't go transmitting it to others. And the Post has also sought to debunk the idea that autism and vaccinations are linked.
How do age and generational differences factor into this conversation?
Well, that's an interesting question. And when I talked to people, they indicated that many Old Colony Mennonites are vaccinated. They were vaccinated as children. So it's not like they always were opposed to this. It seems that the current wave of opposition to vaccination is taking place among younger parents, and that is mostly because of social media, especially posts that share misinformation about autism and vaccinations.
What are your final thoughts on this?
Well, it's just a reminder to all of us not to lump everyone together if we hear the words Mennonites and measles, and also maybe to try to have some understanding about how easy it can be for people to be misled by social media. And then finally, not to shun people if we think they might be from the Old Colony Mennonite Church. They might not be. They might be from some other group altogether that just dresses in that way. And then, of course, we need to give a note of thanks to everyone on the front lines working against the measles outbreak and public health in Manitoba and across Canada, no matter where it's happening or who it's happening to.
All right, John, really valuable column this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcy.
John Longhurst is our faith contributor. If you want to read more about the measles and where we're at this week, please go to our website for the latest reports at cbc.ca/Manitoba.